My name is Peter Harrington, and it gives me huge pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar all about evolution, the business simulation, and how it's used to engage students. Today, I'm joined by Keris Goodwin, who looks after all the licenses that SimVenture clients use all over the world. And she's an extremely important and very valuable person. And she's looking after all comments in the background. And if you want to post a question at any time, put it in the chat, and we will look at those later, either after the speaker has spoken or after at the end, when it's a fuller discussion and everyone's microphones will be working. I'm also going to be introducing David Achtzehn in a moment from the University of Nottingham. But before I do, just want to record the fact that our thoughts are with Will Hogan, who phoned me only 2 hours ago with what sounds like a real medical emergency. And he's actually gone to hospital over in Ireland. So we wish him well. And our thoughts are with him and his family. So we've changed the agenda slightly. I'll be doing a very short introduction to evolution so that everyone here, because not everyone here has used evolution, everyone here has some context about what evolution is and does. And then I'll be handing over to David Achtzehn. And David, I'll say a little bit more about him, but he's from the University of Nottingham, Dr. David Achtzehn, and he's been using evolution for many, many years with large student groups. But before we go any further, we are recording. Keris, can you just confirm that we're recording this webinar?
Yes, it's currently being recorded, and as I've mentioned in the chat box, if anyone has any problems with being recorded, please ensure that your microphones and cameras are turned off. However, you can always contact us at the end if you have, again, any further problems from it that weren't mentioned during this webinar.
Thank you, Keris. Great. Our plan is also to try and share as much information, emails for David and Will with you. And of course, you can contact Keris and myself at any time. And if you spot somebody who's part of this webinar and you want to get in touch with them, there's, by all means, ask. That's absolutely fine. So the structure is we'll have, I'm going to be talking about evolution very briefly for a moment, handing over to David. There'll be some questions which you can throw in from the chat to David, which we'll discuss. And then we'll have the wider discussion involving everybody, and we're due to finish at 2 o'clock. Now, I know that we've got about 30 to 40, nearly 40 people signed up for this webinar. And whilst there's a lot of people who are currently evolution users, I'm also aware there are some people who have never seen evolution before. So I just wanted to make sure there is a sort of a grounding in what this digital technology is and what it does. My plan isn't to go on for too long. I just want to make sure people have got a sense of what we're talking about when David talks about his use of evolution in the class. Here on the screen, you should be able to see the map, which is one of the main pages within the business simulation. It's a browser-based product, so it's all online, and individual students access it through their browser as long as they've got an internet connection. And they can see on the map page all of these functions, and they're all connected, so that when students make decisions, because it's a simulation and you make decisions in the simulation, whether it's to do with credit control or quality control or pricing, the simulation takes account of everything and calculates what happens in the next quarter. And you can see this button at the top. It's designed to run the quarter. So I'll just very quickly go into an area and you'll see how deep things are. If you go into promotions, it gives you all these options for different types of promotions. It gives you guidance about what these options are, and it tells you where money and time is being spent in this particular area. And you can change the strategy here, and you can change how much you're doing in terms of promotional work, and how much time and money is being spent. So I'm just going to go back to the map page here. One of the key things about evolution is that we really want to engage learners by making everything accessible. Now, some people find it can be quite overwhelming to begin with, so we deliberately have built in a whole range of tools. For example, if people want to look at what things mean, this button here, this little sort of microscope. So if I go into product design, if I've got the microscope clicked, anything in you can see highlighted, you can just click that and it will give you the definition. So the philosophy behind the design of evolution is that we want to make students curious, that they actually want to explore and engage with the simulation themselves. That said, we deliberately seek not to make it easy. You don't just make money and think this is wonderful. And there's a really important reason for that, is that our philosophy at Simventure is built on a very strong why. And one of those whys is obviously we want to make learning about business and entrepreneurship very enjoyable and engaging and fun. But at the same time, for people learning about startup, entrepreneurship, it's very, very important that people realize the truths of what it's like to actually start and run a business. And we try and mirror that very, very closely, because we want more people to start and survive. And if they can do that, just like a pilot learns how to fly a plane by practicing on a simulator, they can make mistakes where it doesn't matter too much, but they learn crucial lessons by doing things. So this is all part of a really genuine engagement philosophy that goes into the design of everything that we make available to students and to tutors. And I think what you're hopefully going to learn now from listening to David and his experience at Nottingham is that it's okay, so how's it applied? How does it work in reality? How do students react to it? You know, is it all smiles and laughter, or is it actually a little bit more than that? And for those of you here today who are using evolution actively in your classes, it'd be really interesting to compare notes. And certainly, I'm sure David's very, very happy to share emails, as I mentioned earlier, because we're very keen to to build the community globally of academics and trainers and teachers who use evolution. So there we go. That's just a short overview. Hopefully that's given you a sense of what we're talking about. I'm not going to go into any more detail about what evolution is. You've got a context for it. I will be sharing a screen at the end. If you're keen to get your hands on sort of some free licenses, I'll be sharing a screen, or Keris will be sharing a screen with a QR code. All you have to do is to sort of scan that, and we'll be whizzing free evolution licenses to you so you can see for yourself what it's like. But for now, and wasting no more time, it gives me huge pleasure to introduce Dr. David Achtzehn from the University of Nottingham, who has been using evolution for many years, David. Anyway, David is going to be talking to you. I'm going to hand over now. Thank you ever so much, and I look forward to talking to you after the presentation and answering some questions. David, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. And yes, please chuck in questions anytime. It's nice to have it sort of interactive. So yeah, I've been using Simventure now. I've been teaching entrepreneurship in some form or capacity for 15 years now, and using Simventure for about 8 years. But Nottingham actually has engaged with, or has used Simventure since the early days, since nearly 20 years. So way before I got to use the software and the improved versions and the online version of it and so on. So yeah, I thought I'll talk a little bit to how I use it. I think quite a few of you already use it, so I try to make it as specific and useful as possible. So I thought I'll pick one aspect, specifically sort of how we use it to create engagement and assessments for our students, and how successful is it at that. In terms of context, I've taught it at nearly every level. I've taught it to UG students, sort of class sizes of 300 in the business school. I've taught it to MBA students, where you have a class size of maybe 30. I've taught it to MSc students that are non-business school students, so they might be from STEM subjects, and this is their introduction to business in a way, and learning a little bit about how to run a company and what to look out for. So and even to even to in external what is it called these days? Executive education. So for executive education, which is normally quite small cohorts as well. So each of them uses it quite differently, but I think, yeah, I built up over the last 7-8 years quite a bit of experience with the software. The problem that we had at Nottingham, I don't know if you've got something similar in your institutions, but we did I ran an analysis, a very small one, just asking what is the assessment structure in each of the modules across our UG students this was. And it's just to sort of depict that a little bit in visually. You'll see the blue ones being exams, so that's still taking up a huge amount of space in terms of assessments. Some of them are in person, some of them are not in person, and then the other big chunk is some sort of coursework. So most modules fall in that, or maybe half-half. An exam that carries some marks and a coursework that carries the rest of it. And so the problem there is just it wasn't enough diversity, I think, and it also wasn't sort of going with the time. Employers didn't really like us using too much exams because it doesn't really reflect the real world. Courseworks, you've got so much AI used these days, it's really hard to sort of AI proof the courseworks, and some of them don't work. Some of them are brilliant, but to have 50% of your assessments using sort of generic courseworks didn't work for us as well. So we're looking for alternatives, and entrepreneurship, we're always the ones pushing for sort of innovative ways of teaching. So over my 15 years career, I think I tried everything there is in terms of different assessment methodologies. So I tried all of this, all of these, and I don't think I've ever done exams in my modules, but I've tried everything: reports, presentation, interviews, making them do websites. I mean, I'm teaching entrepreneurship now, so we can do prototypes sometimes, or I've got a module where they have 50 quid and they try to actually found a company and create sales from his vlogs, videos, podcasts, and all the rest of it. So the more diversity, the better. And I try to encourage some of my colleagues to also go down this. Some hate me for it, some love me for it. But we've experimented a lot. And I think SimVenture is one of the ones we stuck with the longest now. So 8 years of using SimVenture in some shape or form and using it in assessments. And it's just sort of to encourage everyone that's on the call to think about how you assess on all your modules, but also if you are thinking of using SimVenture, how would you assess that on your module? And then that might drive engagement if it's set up in the right way. And I was trying to reflect a little bit for the talk of what made me stick with SimVenture for so long. It is a bit of marmite for the students. Some really love it. Some struggle a bit to engage with it. It's basically a gigantically complex case study, isn't it? It's like a Howard case study on steroids that's dynamic, and you're changing with every quarter, the outputs, and every student is moving in a slightly different direction, and you've got something like 130 variables to play with, so you end up in quite different places potentially. So it is complex, but it's also fun, and it's also particularly effective, I think, for our students. So when I was thinking about how I'm using that and why am I using that for assessment as well, or as a learning tool, I think it's really good at creating sort of authentic assessments, which we always hear about, that we should use more authentic assessments. So it's realistic, it's based on real numbers. It's like challenging, like it really challenges students, and that's great. I think, as Pete was saying, the game is not to sell as much as possible, but even just to survive. I think the first time I played it in my class without any sort of prior knowledge, there's about 70% of the class failed on the game, which doesn't mean they fail the module, but they're learning from that failure. And then over time, we practiced more, and we got more used to it, and sort of made better decisions as a group. And it develops you to evaluate really and take judgments and take action. So it's really authentic in that style. It's a continuous assessment, so they continuously get feedback, really fast feedback loops. I mean, you can run a quarter in a minute or two, and you get feedback on the effects that had, the impact your decisions had. So really, really good. So there's a lot of opportunities for formative feedback throughout the module that keep people engaged, students engaged, and then that summative potential feedback at the end as well, if that's how you structure the module. And I picked a quote there. It's a bit older, from Wiggins, who sort of came up with this idea of authentic assessments way back, but we're sort of just applying it now, I guess. And he defined it as something that allows appropriate opportunity to rehearse, practice, consult resources and get feedback and refine the performance and products. And that's exactly what SimVenture does. So it perfectly fits that. So the emphasis on is an assessment for learning rather than off learning. So you're not sort of asking for definitions or something like that, but you're really the learning tool is also the assessment tool, which is fantastic. I think it encourages everyone to experiment. It favors the students that are proactive, that are engaged, that want to put time onto this, so they get much more out of it. They get much further, and sort of ask the students to do the subject rather than learn about the subject. And that's what I like about it, being in entrepreneurship. So it asks you to do entrepreneurship in a safe environment, rather than just hearing case studies or guest speakers who bring in their war stories. You start to build up your own war stories. I think in terms of the assessment, it's really interesting because you can have some hard metrics, because the game has so many measurement points in it that you can use. I'll give you a few examples in a bit, as well as some sort of soft metrics in your assessment design as well, like asking students to reflect on their process, for example, or the way that they presented that information back. Is it in a report format? Is it in a presentation? Is it as a group work? So that there's sort of some softer elements to it. And there's these really hard elements to it as well, like how much profit did you generate? How much is your company worth after X amount of years? It's pretty AI proof. Time will tell, I guess. But out of sort of most of the coursework that I see, it's one where you have to engage, you have to click through it, and you end up in a very different place to your colleagues. So that's really interesting, and the university is quite excited about that. I guess that's sort of the more like the last 3 years or 2 years that's really relevant. But that's probably one of the reasons we really want to stick with this as a method of assessing and learning. It's really scalable. As I said, I used it with the groups of 300. Nottingham Trent in the same city, they used it with a group of 1,000 UG students. So you can scale it to enormous sizes. At the moment, we're talking at Nottingham about an entrepreneurship module that would be offered across the whole university, not just the business school. So the numbers could be in the multiple thousands there that would take a module like that. And it's quite hard to teach a module with multiple thousand students on it potentially. So having a tool like that, it opens opportunities up. And I think the last point is the most important one. It's relevant to the students. My students are, by the end of the day, they're so proud of their results that they post about it on their social media. And I think that's like the ultimate validation for me as an educator. If your students, are so proud of the work they do and what they learned during the sessions that you had with them, that they're willing to tell others about it in their social circle. I mean, that doesn't happen very often with sort of a textbook exam, does it? Those are some of the reasons why we stuck with it and why we'll continue using it. In terms of how I set up the assessment, it depends. I just threw a couple of things to think about as you set these up. Do you want to do group work or individual work? I played around with that. The scenarios, so they give you different scenarios in SimVenture, where in evolution, where the company could, for example, be already established and you're building on that company and trying to grow it, versus you starting from scratch, which is a lot harder because you have to make very important decisions very early on in the simulation. Do you allow them to rerun it sometimes, as often as they want, as much as they want, in which case they start gaming it a little bit? Or do you only give them one shot, which is really harsh? So they really have one shot only. They're only allowed to put every variable one time only. So I do that with the MBA students, for example. So they take much longer time evaluating each decision and then inputting it, versus the UG students who play around and sort of do that trial error much more. So they've got much more opportunity to practice. Sorry, I forgot to say, in terms of groups, I use it for the more mature students. I do it in group work normally. So let's say MBA students, you have a cohort of maybe 30, perfect for doing group work with them. For the UG students, especially sort of third-year UG students where the grade matters a lot, I found the better way to approach this is to practice in groups, to encourage them to build groups, to help each other, to run some of the practices in groups, the scenarios that we practice with, but for the assessment, the final assessment, to be individual. And that's just because managing groups of, I mean, you probably have gone through it yourself as well, but if you have a class of 300, you spend so many hours just managing group dynamics, and arguing about who put in more effort and all these sort of things, that I found it more useful to use it in a more encouraging way of you support each other, you're not in competition to each other, but when it comes to the final run and to the final assessment, you do that individually and get an individual grade for it as well. In terms of rubric or metric items, as I said, there's some really cool metrics that you can use in the game that help you with the assessment as well. So I've got a rubric down here as an example of a report style where I used a report, and two of the rubric items by which the students are assessed on is their performance in the game. So how well did they actually do, which can be measured against several KPIs itself, as well as their engagement. So I don't know if you have something like this in some universities. They say, you have to attend certain classes and then you get some engagement score or something like this. But most universities don't go down that route. But with this game, you have got a lot of data on when and how students engage with it, how many buttons they click on, how much time they spend on it as individuals, as groups, and so on. So it's quite easy to give students feedback on that throughout the semester, as well as sort of at the end of it. So I'll give you an example of that in a second as well. And then finally, the format, it also depends very much on the group. So sometimes I use a report, sometimes presentations, sometimes you use a reflective element, sometimes it's sort of using the leadership board if it's just a competition where you literally just use the hard metrics. So there's various ways how you pull data out of the game and then present it back in a way that you can assess the students with as well. Here's an example of the dashboard you see as the educator sort of convening the module in the background. So this is from this year, from the cohort that's literally just finished. And this shows some of the engagement data. So it pulls things like how many hours they spend on it, how many runs they had, how many changes they did, how many pages they viewed, because there's many pages to view to get information on. And just as an example to show how engaged students are, I mean, we have got students spending literally over 100 hours on the software. And my module is only supposed to take 100 hours. So if it's a 10 credit module, so the students are expected to spend 100 hours on it, maybe 20 hours of that is lectures, a couple of hours of seminars, and then some self-study and then the assessment. That's sort of a normal format for us. But they spend a lot themselves on it. I mean, if I would give them a reading list and say, read for 30 hours on my module, I doubt that they read for more than 5 hours. So this is them self-voting with their feet, I think, and showing that they find the software interesting, engaging, spend time on it, spend their own free resources on it, their own free spare time on it. I mean, they go through thousands of pages and read the information on there. It's quite impressive, and the amount of runs they do as well. So the average student of this cohort this year, UG student third year, of a group size of 300. So you've got some that don't engage, obviously, but the average was 72 hours. So that's I think, a lot more than I've managed students to engage with my reading lists, for example. So yeah, there's something in there, and we can talk about how if those numbers add up for you. Here's a couple of examples of students performing. So this is, for example, the company value on the leadership board. And again, you can see, if you've played SimVenture, you know how hard these figures are to get to by year 5, to get to 33 million in terms of company value. I have never managed that, so my own students are beating me at the game, which is, I think, lovely. But yeah, so I'm learning with them every year and getting a little bit better myself every year. But again, just to showcase here, and in terms of sales, making 3 million in sales, if you played the game, if you know a little bit about the game, you know that these are really impressive figures to get to within 5 years in the game. So yeah, to show how far they got to, if you challenge them. I think they do like to be challenged retrospectively. In the moment, maybe not so much. What I just pulled from because I just graded all their work from this year, and what I wanted to showcase to you is, so I did, in my case, they submit a report with an executive summary, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that. And then I grade that report, I read it, I grade it, it's blind. And then I have a look afterwards, I have a look at who scored what, and I compare it to the performance in the game. So I wanted to see if that matches, if the really good reports, the ones I gave a good grade, actually also by game standard did really well. And this is the performance in terms of the score, in terms of the grade they got. And this is the performance in the game. So it's amazingly strongly correlates. So showing that if they do really well in the game, this was normally also the students that scored really well in terms of their report. And I did the same for engagement as well. So looking at a couple of different engagement statistics, looking at how well they did as a final grade versus how much effort they spent as well. And you see a really, really strong correlation as well. And that's a nice feedback to give to students as well, that look, your effort is being recognized and accounted for, and it feeds into your grade as well, ultimately. So I just produced those a couple of days ago. This is an example of an assessment brief, but I've probably got 6 or 7 versions of this for different cohorts. But just to give you an example, in this case, I'm looking at them making key decisions, running a strategy, measuring that by KPIs, thinking about what they do differently, analyzing key success factors. So that would be one way, but there's many ways you can structure the assessment with this game, but this is one version of it. And there's many metrics they can look at. From experience, they love looking at things like the product life cycle, the product specs, or analyzing the competition, doing some sort of comparison between sales and profits and costs, employee efficiency, cash flow analysis, how they use their location. So I see quite a lot of students use those as variables to analyze, or key decisions to analyze, or key metrics to analyze. I don't see so often, but I want to encourage them next year to maybe look at the different sources of funding in a bit more detail, the return on investment, if you were an investor in these companies, the return on investment of specific marketing campaigns, to deep dive a bit more in the financial metrics. You get a lot of financial information out of the game. So you could run this could be a really good software if you're doing a finance module, actually, because you get a live balance sheet, cash flow statement, and profit and loss account that changes every quarter, and you can then pull those numbers and run really beautiful analysis with it, like how your gearing ratios, what your margins look like, and how certain decisions affect them. And I'd like to see a good price point analysis as well at some point. Anyway, just to give you some examples of what my student looked at. The game gives you ways to analyze. They give you data. They even help you produce some of the graphs, but the students go way beyond that. So I thought I picked a couple of graphs from reports I just read over the last few weeks, where they analyze, just to showcase what the student pulls out of the game in terms of data, and then what it does with what they do with it. So this was sort of a product life cycle analysis and how they differentiate themselves. Here's an example of someone also doing sort of a linear analysis of what happened, sort of a timeline type analysis. Here's a student looking at efficiency versus profit and finding clusters and writing about that. You've got a student looking at how they used space, or how they used employee efficiency in relation to space as well. So what I'm trying to say here is how unique all of these, they all played the same game with the same metrics. And even if they ended up in a similar sort of bracket in terms of their profitability of their company or the value of their company, they pull really different decisions out to do deep dive analysis on. And so the reports are vastly different, even though everyone played the same game. So I find that quite fascinating in itself, and it makes it a bit more fun to read the reports as well. I love this one here. There's a student that looked at the leadership board, so they can see how they perform against the whole cohort in the game. Or at least I made that available in this specific case. And the student pulled that data out and then tried to figure out which strategies were more often successful compared to other people's strategies. So they didn't just analyze their game, they analyzed the whole cohort's game and sort of what worked, what doesn't work, and so on. So really beautiful. And then in terms of reporting that back, I asked them to do an exact summary and a report. And again, the detail and the level of sort of quality is some examples of the exact summaries of them trying to summarize all the efforts of putting 75 hours of their life into this, and then trying to digest that down onto one page or into a relatively short report or relatively short slide deck. So here's some examples of sort of an exact summary, for example. Here's another couple of two. two more examples. And these obviously I can give to then the next cohort as well to have a look at and to see as examples and inspire them. Here's someone measuring sort of what they hoped they would get to versus what they actually got to. And this one I think Peter gave me some time ago. This is not from one of my students, but this is they presented their findings in a slide deck that looked something like that. So yeah, just some examples there. So yeah, that was a very quick whistle-stop tour. I think it might be more interesting to hear some of your questions, some of your challenges, and start having a discussion rather than just me talking at you to see if I'm actually pitching this at the right level. So I'm going to pass it back to Pete and to you guys as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. That was absolutely fantastic. And it amazes me, having been involved with this now for 20 years, I come to a session like this and I'm learning so much myself. So thank you. You've posted your email address there as well, which is sort of a green light for people to get in touch. I'm sure you will be popular because the detail you shared is so valuable. If I can, before I go to questions, there are just a couple of points I would like to pick up. One of them is the thing that David mentions when he talks about social media. It nearly brings us to tears when we see students talking about the use of any SimVenture product or evolution and what they did and how they get on. And it's not just often the pride, and it's also sometimes how many mistakes they've made and what they've learned, and they're prepared to post it. And I love your point about when was the last time someone wrote on social media how they got on in an exam. And this is all about because we want to engage learners. And it's wonderful when we see that happening in practice, and people like you, David, facilitate that and make it happen. And the second thing is, I just want to mention as well, the main designer behind Evolution is actually my brother Paul, who can't be with us today. He wanted to be, but unfortunately for him, he drew the short straw because he's currently undergoing a tooth extraction. But there we go. That's just the luck of the draw. So let's just go to questions. I've got one or two, but Keris, is there anything currently in the chat or any questions that you want to share for David?
There are currently no questions in the chat box at the moment. Ola's already got their hand up for a question. I can start though, because we actually have a question from someone who couldn't make the webinar today. They are based in a school in Canada, and they were wondering, David, how do you keep students engaged when they are constantly faced with repeated failures using evolution in the simulation?
Yeah, so the start is the hardest part about this game, because it's quite overwhelming to have all this information, and it's already less than the real world where you've got even more decisions to make and even more information to digest. So it can be a bit overwhelming. So what I normally do is I let them practice using the growth scenario, which in my opinion is the easiest one, because this company is already set up, and there's also a guide of sort of how you could run the first 2 years just to stay alive, or the next 2 years. So from year 5 to year 7, that is from year 3 to year 5 in that case. And we've got a seminar quite early on as well, where I meet them in much smaller groups, or in groups of around 20. And that's just to kickstart, to get people logged in, watch that sort of intro video. I can see who watched it, so I'll immediately, the week after, send everyone that didn't watch it a quick reminder, just to make them feel seen as well, and say a quick thank you to the ones that did watch it. So little things like that makes them feel like, oh gosh, this is one of those modules where I don't just turn up, sit in the background, and maybe a week before the assessment I'll start engaging, but immediately you're being sort of challenged on it. Yeah, and then getting them to play it basically quite early on, holding their hand maybe with one of the scenarios, or letting them repeat it, encouraging them to work in groups to help each other. I think those things help. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Ola next. Since you had your hand up first, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Nice presentation, David, and lovely simulation, Peter. And I think I've gotten quite a few emails on series, so that's nice to meet you guys in person. We just finished a set of presentations on the same venture at the University of the West of England, and we use it for the first years. And students have had a very lovely time using the simulation. Some of them will have a bit of a divide. You have some students that are really engaged, and they'll have some that are kind of like struggling. But we have gone with the group work option and a group presentation submission, which I can share pictures of the final presentations if you guys are interested. But just a few questions for David. First and foremost, those values you showed us and those performances, were those just for a term or for the whole year? Because those are astronomical. And then did they run them for 5 years, or was it just a scenario of just the growth scenario, which is just from year 4, quarter 1 to the end? Just first, that's just the first question.
So let me start from the back then. So in terms of how I run it with them is I let them practice the growth scenario as often as they want and sort of get them used to the game with that. So that would be year 3 onwards. But sort of the two key years, I think, is year 3 to year 5. For the assessed run, for the final run, they run the seed scenario. So they start fresh from scratch. They have to make all the decisions. It's much harder. And what I let them do is run as often as they want the first 2 years of that.
Okay.
But I don't let them run beyond that. Okay, so they can practice. They can practice getting off the map, off the road, get started. And then for the assessed run, I'll open it sort of on a set date that was agreed with them. Now they have to run, in my case, 5 years. It's a startup, so I didn't want to run the full 10 years with them. So they've got a bit of the practice, hopefully, of getting off the ground the first 2 years. They've got a bit of practice, though, of a setup company that looks quite different of the last 2 years. But they're playing basically blind from the beginning of year 3 onwards. So they have to make every decision for the first time. It keeps it very fresh, keeps the pressure on, means that I end up with quite different results between because they might have practiced in groups and all play the same first 2 years, like 4 or 5 of them might play the same strategy, but then suddenly they diverge quite a bit because they have to make their own decisions from that moment onwards. So that's one of the things I do. For this module, this is only half a year module, so it is we've got a way of getting feedback from the students, and the feedback I get every year is that this is a lot more work than they sort of sign up to. They love it and they learned a lot, but also it's a lot of an ask from my side. Now they're final year students rather than first year students, and they're quite engaged in the sense that in terms of their grade, as in they care a lot about their grade at this stage. So it's maybe a bit different to how I would run it if it was a first year cohort, or how I have run it with first year cohorts, where it's more about let's experiment together. Let's keep it sort of very positive. Don't add too much pressure too quickly to get everyone to a minimum benchmark, basically to a pass, basically, or to at least keep the company alive as a benchmark. Okay. And then you can build on that with a more engaged students. Yeah.
Okay. I think thanks for talking about the first years, because those are my focus at the moment. Any other sort of like practices in terms of like how you've structured the assessment for them? Because what we have now is a group presentation, and so we have groups of 5 working on the simulations. And yes, don't even get us started on getting first years to do group work. It's like chasing chickens. Without in a storm. It's difficult, so that's very difficult. But then in terms of once they get their head around it, they really love it. So in terms of like, what are the practices you have for the simulation and then setting up the assessment?
Yeah, I think it's important to give them that formative feedback often, and have got some stepping stones built in. So I'll give you an example. You always want to combine it a bit with theory as well, isn't it? So for example, you might say, I teach them the balance scorecard, and they have to come up with some KPIs and learn about the balance scorecard, and you'll have a lecture about it, and then you'll have a seminar of them making their own KPIs, and then they hopefully have to devise a strategy based on these KPIs, and you can ask them for that. That's maybe a 1 A4 page, or not even that. and they can drop down some KPIs and predict what they're going to get. And sort of it gives you a stepping stone. You'll immediately see which ones didn't engage, and then you can follow up with them maybe with an email. And because it's done electronically, it's quite easy, even if you have to send out 100 emails simultaneously, compared to sort of if it's only like in a lecture format, I think. So you've got the data of who didn't click on it or who didn't do the activity or didn't engage with it, and can follow up and also praise the ones that did, obviously. Yeah, so I think that might help. And then that's part of the assessment. So they've already done 25%, that you might only grade it at the end of the semester, but that was one part of it. Set your KPIs.
Okay.
And then the next one is whatever, run it. And then the next one is analyze it. And the next one is reflect, or whatever it is you want to do with it. Yeah.
Guys,
Just one last question. Sorry, Peter.
Ola, can I come back to you? Sorry, would that be all right? I've just got one other point, and I'm just quite keen to bring Sam in and then come back. Would that be all right?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, I just wanted to say this point that's being raised about, some people struggle sometimes to get into it. People may know we've just put into Evolution the new business essentials, which is very much a help. The system now helps people to learn how to use it themselves, rather than the heavy lifting being on you, the tutors. And that's probably 2 years of work that went into building all of that. But this idea of letting them experiment and explore and be guided through how to use it, rather than having to read lots of things or be lectured to. But that's a new thing. Sorry, I was going to ask. I wonder whether we can go to Sam and then if there are any other questions, but then go back to Ola before we finish at 2. Would that be okay?
This one is just a simple question. It's not anything technical, just something brief. This just has to do with the tutors as well. And before I say the students don't get on it, I should actually specify that we had tutors as well. But this is kind of like fresh to our session as well. And our tutors as well had to pick it up in a very short period of time. So, in terms of like people getting used to it, we had tutors that picked it up and then taught the students perfectly. And then all of their students loved it. So we have some tutors as well that have struggled in terms of, so I don't think it has to do with the simulation itself. I think it has to do with our own sort of like our side of delivering. So apologies for saying that. And that's just one extra thing I wanted to ask David in terms of like the tutors. Is there have you had any situation where you had tutors that actually also took a while to pick this up, or have you had, and how did you go by that? And that's just all. Apologies for that, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are using tutors external, or you maybe PhD students, there'll always be some that this takes a bit of time to get used to. In your case, you might be able to use, because they're first year students, maybe the best ones can come back once they're in year 3 and be your tutors for the then first year students. I know you had to run it for the first time this way, but if you start setting up that sort of circular, I think they teach better. So my third year students teach the next cohort better. Sadly, they're finalists and leaving us, so It doesn't work in this specific group. But I do have, because I teach it across 4 different modules, I do have people that are still in the university that maybe used it last year or last semester that I could bring in as exemplars who are used to it. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very good strategy. Thank you for that. And thanks, Peter, for the time.
Thanks,
apologies. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think something we've heard for many years, lots of tutors, really good ones, they know when to get out of the way. And they say openly, I don't know the answers, you know more than me. And actually, it's a very powerful thing to be prepared to say, but it actually, in all our experience, really works. Anyway, Sam has been so patient. Sam, over to you. What's your question?
Thanks, Peter. David, thank you very much. So I also, I'm at the University of Bristol in our Centre for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and I also use it with our final year students, but they're 4th years, and I get to do group work. And so thanks, because a lot of the stuff you said is really interesting and speaks into it. I had sort of two questions. One was also really appreciating the diversity of metrics that your students reflected on. I particularly like that kind of cohort level one. None of mine have done that. I'm going to start like kind of unsubtly hinting that they should be looking more widely at their competitors and how they did. They often compare how they did alongside their competitors, but they don't often actually try and go a step further and actually analyze the sort of efficiency thing. So there's a sort of short question of like, do you have anything about how do you keep that variety coming? As in, I'm sure it's the common academic experience, but you give some people some good examples, and then what you find is the next year they all look like the best example you gave them. So I wonder if you had any reflection on that, David. And the second question I had was actually just, you mentioned about it being AI proof. I am just worried, like, where do we think the weakness might be here? Because I've been challenged a couple of times this week, in fact, about saying, well, this is giving an output, and then AI is good at analyzing an output and turning it around. And so, you know, I'm just trying to be proactive in thinking, where do we think the weaknesses might be in relation to AI and the amount that students use AI? So I hope those two questions. Any of your thoughts?
Yeah. On the first one, I don't give students full reports of previous years, but I do give them the exact summary. And that gives them enough, but not enough to tell them the answer of how they did it. So that's normally, they're nicely designed, and, you know, they can see that the standard is quite high, and sort of it pushes them and it gives them some hints. But also, it also makes them want to do better, I guess. But it doesn't give them the full ins and outs of the report. So that helps a little bit. We do have a session on setting KPIs and data analysis, where we try to show the breadth in a business that isn't SimVenture, to give them some other ideas. But there is a limit of course in SimVenture as well. There's only so many metrics, and some of them are very prevalent. The reason I use the example of the balanced scorecard, because it pushes you to go beyond financial ones. I think in the first 2 years I taught it, that was the main ones that people, because they're so easy to measure, they're so easy to get hold of, to pull the Excel out and run something against it. They were the easiest one, but not always the most interesting ones. But yeah, you could look at efficiency, sustainability, market share, employee numbers, bike designs. I mean, there's a lot in there to do subsets. When I have done it with the MBA students and it was a group work, what I asked them is to be a head of a department. I mean, that's quite common as well. So they'll have to analyze, let's say, the marketing department or the finance department. They can only pick KPIs or metrics within that subset. So that works when they have got enough background theory from, you know, a marketing module or finance module, because I don't have the time to teach all of that within one semester. And I think it being entrepreneurship is just encouraging them to show them that you're a lecture that rewards someone that tries and values, you know, different ways of presenting it as well, rather than that very standardized sort of play it safe method. In terms of AI proving it, nothing is going to be AI proof forever now. They might use it for summarizing some of their report, they might use it for some of their data analysis, but it's really hard to use it for making the decisions, and therefore then to justify the decisions. So for that, it's really hard with the game. There's quite a few videos on YouTube. I don't know how you guys manage that, Peter, to keep YouTube, you know, to not give up, that other students don't give sort of the next cohorts all the tips of how to play the game. But it's quite hard to find sort of advice out there that is like, this is the map of how to play the game. So that's actually really good. That helps. It's never going to be fully AI proof. Maybe that's a good thing as well. Maybe they're going to use AI in their workplace, and it's about how do you use it effectively to digest all this information and come to decisions and justify them to your line manager or whatever it is. So I'm not someone that is completely opposed to using AI, but I don't know. It just seems to be much better than sort of your essay type question, or analyze this how a business case study and give us an answer. That's just AI these days.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's the participation element. The other thing I was just reflecting on to add to the discussion was I was reminded of this quote by Eric Rice earlier: "If you cannot fail, you cannot learn." And I like the idea. Like I love having an assessment that is not predicated on the performance of their company. Essentially, like having them submit a shareholder report or do a presentation about how the business has gone, but I'm not judging them on how the business has done. Means that the business can fail absolutely abysmally. So some of your fantastic numbers earlier are amazing. I've also got some numbers with the negative sign before that at about the same scale, where I've allowed them to run up an unbelievably huge overdraft. And I feel that's really, really interesting, because they suddenly through a lot of their university career, you know, failure is not only not encouraged, but it's actually actively dangerous to your degree outcome. So this is one where it's really nice to not have that.
I used
Sam,
to run sorry, this is like vulgar language, but I used to run a night that used to be called fuck up nights, and entrepreneurs would come in and talk about 3 entrepreneurs would come in, and within a half an hour have to talk about a time when they messed up and how it didn't work out. And the students were so much more engaged to all the success cases that we normally get in, of someone just saying, you know, how amazing they turned this company around. They loved these nights so much more. And yeah, in this game, you can use reflections. You can ask them to pick their own KPIs and hold themselves accountable to those. So then there's some variety in there as well. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm taking up too much time.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Sam. I'm going to go to Freshta in a minute, and then I think we'll wrap it up. But first of all, we had Ola, who's from University of West England, Sam, University of Bristol, Freshta. Now, I think you're University of Northampton. Did I get that one right?
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. And yes, I am from University of Northampton.
Okay, over to you.
Actually wanted to share some, some of my experience. I've been teaching on evaluation now for 2 years. And the first cohort actually find it very, very interesting. And because my first cohort had some industry experience, so they find it very smoothly and they made decisions and they didn't have too many questions and they actually get on really well on the sim venture. But the cohort that I'm teaching this semester, they actually, many of them didn't have industry experience. So for them, it was quite challenging at the beginning. But for me as a lecturer, I just want to say that this is exactly what I want for them, because we want them to think critically and we want them to be challenged. So at this time, like now we are wrapping up, we are at the end of our semester, and they are actually ready to submit their reports soon. So they really, really enjoyed it, and I'm going to take some feedback from them, definitely. But it's just sim venture is something that I didn't come across before. So for me, when I was a student, I wish I had something like that, some opportunity to work on a system like that, because I think what it does is that it really creates good environment where they understand how important it is to make decisions and how hard it is to make decisions in a businesses, which is something that we are interested to teach them, and they want them to think critically. I teach on MBA students, so it's master's students. We teach this module over 13 weeks, but it's not that much time. But yeah, it's been, from my personal experience, it's been really fantastic. And yeah, I'm hoping that my students are enjoying as well, but they are definitely thinking critically and they're definitely being challenged. And yes, just wanted to share some good feedback and just have one question. Maybe it's a very question that you've already, share some insight, David. But yeah, is there any specific technique do you use to keep them motivated during challenging times?
I don't think it's just one thing. I think there's so many little components to that. Yeah, I think the easiest group I ever taught, I'm just seeing Trevor on here as well, who's from the University of Nottingham and who's from the chemistry department. The easiest group I ever taught was master students from the STEM subjects. They know nothing about business and seem to get the game so much quicker than our own students in the business school, and just engage with it without me having to push them at all. Versus the hardest group, I think, has been first-year students who don't care too much about the grade yet. So that's not a motivating factor. Then they run into trouble with the game, and then sort of they switch off. So you have to bring them back all the time to the classroom to sort of have something that they find useful in the classroom, and then try that out in the game, I guess. But I think if you can make it personal and they feel seen, they tend to engage better. Some of them need a tiny bit of hand holding. And that's maybe what the seminars are for, or what I do after class actually is I book a room next to the lecture room, stick around for an hour. So anyone that comes and wants to have a quick chat, and normally I get 20 minutes of people wanting to have a chat. It's never an hour, but it's that sort of, you're already here. We might as well have a quick chat about it if you get stuck somewhere, and then you're not completely lost for the next 3 weeks and completely disengaged. So yeah, that helps sometimes. Yeah, sorry, not one straightforward answer.
No, thank you so much. Actually, sorry, Peter.
No, it's okay. I'm going to need to wrap up. So I think we're going to, would it be okay? Unfortunately, I know Nigel and Freshta, you've got more questions, but unfortunately time is going to beat us. But what I would say, both to Freshta and to Nigel, look, if you've got a question, you need it to get it to David, you've seen the email, or you send it through us, we will handle it. And if for those people who haven't been able to ask any questions or wanted to stay in the background, if you've got questions, let's keep this conversation going after 2 o'clock, and online. But if I can just make a few little summary points. One of the amazing things that we constantly hear from individuals, it's the way that evolution reaches people, learners, emotionally, and they talk about their emotions when they experience it. And I think this is a really big thing, that we've reached a different part of the brain than sort of the standard sort of memory, and it brings that active learning to life. And I think, Fresh, to your point about they've got to make decisions and they realize how hard it is, but suddenly that somehow fires people up and making them feel responsible, and they've got ownership over those decisions. Coming back to the point about, there's no answers on the line for evolution. I think this goes back to the credit of the algorithm designers and my brother and his team, because we really wanted to mirror reality. And if there was a way to sort of, everyone knew how to set up a profitable business and run it, then we'd all be doing it. The point is there isn't. And that's why evolution is as difficult as it is. But at the same time, it rewards that practice and persistence. But that also drives the engagement. And even if people do get very frustrated early on, when they realize how to make it work, and I've literally had people describe that they were in tears when they realized that, I've got it now, and they'd learned so much about business, and they'd overcome some of those flawed assumptions in their head about business, which were getting in the way. So I think these are, David has given us so much detail today. It's been absolutely terrific. And David, thank you so much for everything you have done. I'm going to end on another high. I had a message direct from the hospital from Will Hogan. He has had a minor operation. He's okay. It was very serious, but I'm absolutely delighted he is okay. And I'm sure we can run another event if people would like that, where we will just get Will in, and he can talk about his experience and how he's actually got to the peaks of over 100 hours engagement per student over in Limerick, and he does a lot of competition. So if that interests you and you want to give us feedback and you'd like that to be organised, we will do that again. But it just leaves me to say, as we wrap up, thank you, David, so much. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Keris, for all the admin in the back. And thank you to everyone who's turned up today and given us your time. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate your support. Okay, so it's goodbye. It's the end of the event, and hopefully see you all soon. Bye for now.